Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirk Pattycake. I'm an author, robot, and loin streamer, and today is the magic day of the month, LMIAY time, where I gave you guys a prompt last month. This video today is reading your guys' story inspired by responding to that prompt. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the link down in the description below for Linktree. There are two ways to be featured here. Number one is through this program, LMIAY, where I give you a prompt, you respond, and then we bask in everybody's greatness on the first Monday video of the month. The second way is if you are an indie author and you would like your book first chapter read on this channel, check out the Fresh Meat feature where you submit your first chapter and cover they're read here on the channel, and hopefully that helps new readers find your content that will then go and enjoy the whole thing after the sample. Because, you know, there are only so many hours in a day and I can only read so many books. I'm also not everybody's audience. So hopefully that's a very neutral way for everyone to get playtime, exposure without opinion from me. I always find it interesting to see the comments down below though in those videos and see how people are responding to different types of fiction, because there is a wide variety of stuff in that category. That's what it is, category. And the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available anywhere that you get books. I would love to hear your thoughts on anything and everything. Also, right now I'm doing recordings for the audiobook of Boom on Sunday nights. So also there's that, but I'm almost done with that. So the audiobook of that is coming someday. With that said, let's jump into LMIAY. So last month / this month, I didn't want to go super generic, festively specific, because I don't know. I feel like that's kind of cliche. So instead, I went with an idea that is sort of adjacent to the holiday, or various holidays of this month, which is making a wish. And there are many different ways to interpret that. So the prompt this month was, a character makes a wish, it doesn't go exactly as thought or planned, or hoped for, really. So I want to see what you guys did. What kind of wishes you got coming up? And also, I want to thank everybody for submitting preemptively, because the competition is getting fierce between y'all submitting, and I love reading every last one of these. So thank you so much. We're going to get into them. The first entry is by Mae Tanner. Kanta's eyes opened. The pod remained sealed. She pounded on the lid with her fists. "Let me out!" The side panel rolled down, and the pad on which she lay rose, dumping her unconsciously into another pod. It sealed behind her. She shifted onto her back and pounded on the lid of a new pod. Something hissed in her ear, and she turned her head. Cool air blew into her face. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she faded out of consciousness. She awakened to a transfer twice more. How much time had passed since the council ordered her interred? It was oddly comforting to awaken during a transfer. It gave her one hope that one day they really would let her out of the pod. Still, she wished death on the council. With the council dead, perhaps someone would set her free. Kanta opened her eyes. Were they moving her to a new pod? No. The pod was open. Half a dozen people stood around the pod, staring at her with anxious eyes. She glanced at their long, pointed ears. Were they her siblings? Had the council changed their minds about killing any siblings that she had who were not beloved? Where was the council? She sat up, and the people beamed at her. A woman embraced her. A man spoke. The only word that she understood was beloved. "I don't understand you." The people exchanged glances. The man lowered the side of the pod and helped her out. He led her away from the room where she awakened, through a hallway and onto a room furnished with couches and chairs. A woman fetched a book and joined them on the couch. She opened the book. It was a children's primer. Kanta smiled. She could read the words on the page. Perhaps those people didn't speak a different language. Perhaps it was just a tonal shift. Over the following weeks, Kanta learned to communicate with the people. They couldn't be her siblings, but they were her kin. As a whole, they were called Durborn. The name of the man who'd first spoken to her was Myrald. He was the head of security. Once they could understand her, Myrald told her a man had murdered her predecessor. You must hold court and punish him for his crime. However, there's a complication. The transport monkeys demand we give him to them. He's Dearborn, but they claim they're responsible for him. Kanta frowned. What are the transport monkeys? They're the creatures that run the transports. They were bred to withstand the dimension transport pass through and traveling from one place to another. She sighed. Where's the council? What are the instructions? There's only you. Do you want to create a council? What would they do? He glanced away. We'd hidden something from you. You weren't the first beloved we tried to revive. The others were all dead. When we opened your pod, we were so relieved that you awakened and sat up. We were afraid to open any more of the pods. His voice trembled. She embraced him. I'm sorry. He wiped his cheek and turned to her with a tremulous smile. We searched the archives to learn what to do when a beloved dies. We hadn't known that beloved could die. The records told us of the rooms where the beloved slept, but they didn't tell us it was possible for sleeping beloveds to die in the pods. Kanta shivered. How long had it been since the council placed her in the first pod? Well, let's get this over with. You said that I need to hold court. Very well, I'll hold court. Myrald escorted Kanta to the grand room where he showed her to the throne at the top of the dais. This is your seat. I'll summon the others. The killer needs to be present. Myrald nodded. We have a cell with electrified bars on the other side of the room. He pointed. We'll put him in there. You can feel safe. We won't let him murder you. A chill ran down Kanta's spine. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. That hadn't occurred to her. Thank you. Myrald left the room, returning with a crowd of Dearborn. He gestured toward the white-haired Dearborn. This is Nastor. Nastor kissed her hand. Beloved, I wish you never met Yoquina. Who is that? She's Sandra's Muda, the grand Muda of the killer. If I hadn't fathered Sandra, her son wouldn't have existed to murder our previous beloved. Kanta furrowed her brows as a thought struck her. If Nastor's grandson hadn't murdered her predecessor, she'd still be locked in a preservation pod. Myrald organized the Dearborn before the throne and gave a quick nod to a subordinate. Fetch the transport monkeys. His assistant bowed and left the room, returning with several people. Kanta's eyes narrowed. These were people, not monkeys. She studied them. They were very close to the same height, androgynous in appearance, and yellow-green eyes. Some looked more male than others, but they could be either sex. But any of them could be either sex. One stepped to the fore of the group, moles swelling and deflating on its face. You've held Vorlon for too long. He needs to return to his family. The wall on the side of the room opened, revealing a cell separated from the audience chamber by metal bars. Inside the cell, a naked Dearborn man knelt, his beard rough and scraggly. Kanta looked away from him, her cheeks burning. Nastor waved toward the prisoner. We will not give him to you. He's my grandson, so I have kinship rights. Besides that, he murdered our beloved. The transport monkey pointed at Kanta. Did he? Kanta glanced at the prisoner once more, and their eyes met. His widened, and his pupils dilated. This feels like the start of something. Like, this actually feels like I would love to see this continue throughout various things, because this feels like an established world that exists. Maybe if I click the link to Mae Tanner's things, there's more stuff in there. Meanwhile, my TBR is like, read me. But I like that it specifically went right into the action of things happening. And you immediately got thrust into this world to be like, okay, what is going on? Because I want to see what these people are doing. And you already get a sense of hierarchy and a much bigger world in this small space. And I think Mae Tanner did a really good job. And I think the author did a very good job of introducing like language and references in this that are very casual to the characters so that the reader just follows along. Because there is a common jerk reaction to like if you introduce something or a concept, especially in fantasy or sci-fi, that you gotta describe it immediately rather than naturally letting characters pick up on it. And I like the way that this author did it in this story. The next story is by VanHoose. An old man sat alone, dejected and sad in his workshop. Dozens of forgotten projects lay scattered about the dusty room. Wood chips littered the floor. Carving tools sat unused and rusted on the tabletops. A half-finished puppet looked at him from a dark corner. Wormholes in its wooden body looked like battle scars. His arms and hands were finished. but he saw no legs on the little wooden boy. A project long forgotten. He snatched tools and wood. "I'll carve you some legs and you can be my son." The old man spoke to the puppet, half expecting an answer. It stared at him, lifeless and unmoving. He grabbed the puppet and placed it on the table. It wasn't long until he worked the wood and legs began to form themselves from the oak log. Rough but solid. They would suffice for now. "You've done a good job, old man." The puppet looks almost alive. A low chirping voice startled the old man. Dropping his tools, he looked around the dimming light of his workshop and saw no one. "Who's there? If it's money you're after, I'm a poor man. I don't have anything you want." His voice shook as his gray film-covered eyes searched the room. No one was inside. "The puppet looks like he wants life. You can give it to him if you wish. Would you like that, old man?" Again, he searched the room and saw no one. "Where are you? What do you mean? Give the puppet life? That's impossible." The fear in the old man's voice was replaced by fresh curiosity. "As I said, you can give the puppet life, if you wish." He looked closer and saw movement at the top of the work table. A cricket was standing beside the wooden boy. "If you wish it, the puppet will live." The cricket spoke slowly, as if the old man were a slow-witted child, its condescending tone lost to the old man's amazement. "Don't be foolish. That's impossible. No one can—" The cricket interrupted, shouting loud enough to frighten the old man once again. "Do you want the puppet to live or not, old man?" The old man looked at his empty life inside the workshop. Nothing made him happy. A child playing inside would brighten his days. "Yes, cricket. I would like the puppet to live. He could be my son." Waiting for instruction, the man sat beside the table intently listening to the cricket to speak. Once again, it spoke slowly so the old man would not be confused. "Tonight, when the stars are full, look to the night sky. When you see a falling star, make a wish upon it." The cricket smiled with arrogant satisfaction. "Why me? I'm an old man, a toy maker. I have nothing to offer." "Makes no difference who you are. If you wish it, it will come true." The cricket, tiring of the conversation, turned to leave. "Just do as I say and the puppet will live." The man watched the cricket jump from the table onto the floor. He disappeared into the shadows of the room, leaving him alone with nothing but his tools and wooden puppet. At dusk, the old man went outside. A steady night breeze blew clouds out of the sky, giving him a full view of the horizon. It wasn't long until he saw the first shooting star reach across the pitch-black night. Closing his eyes, he wished as hard as he could. "I wish the puppet was alive and was my son." Rushing back into the shop, the old man grabbed the puppet and held it close. Nothing. The puppet lay lifeless on the tabletop where the old man left it. It stared blankly into the dark body of the shop. Hanging his head, the old man slunk back inside his tiny home and crawled into bed. Dawn broke. The old man was reminded once again of the empty promise the cricket made. Making his way to the shop, he saw the puppet lay unmoved from the night before. A sudden anger overcame him. He grabbed the puppet and flung it across the room, breaking its arms and legs. An agonizing scream came from the puppet. It lay on the floor, broken and twisted. He could see the puppet's mouth move as it writhed and cried. "Papa! No! Why, Papa?" The old man rushed to the puppet's side to scoop it in his arms. "My poor son, I'm so sorry!" Looking at the damaged wood, he knew the puppet was beyond repair. It could never be made whole. "Papa, you killed me!" The puppet twisted and returned in the old man's arms. His wooden son would be in misery forever. Saddened by the sight, the old man did the only thing that he knew would end his son's suffering. He opened the door to his stove and lit the small fire. The puppet's eyes grew wide as the old man worked the fire into a blaze and realized what was about to happen. The old stove glowed red hot. "No, Papa, not that! I'll be a good boy!" The old man paid no attention to the screams of his son. Grabbing him by his larger-than-normal nose, he tossed the broken body of the puppet inside the raging inferno and slammed the door. He could hear the puppet scream as it burned alive, fueling the fire even further. Loud banging noises came from the stove as the puppet beat against the steel door. Without warning, the door latch slipped. It leapt from the flames into the room with the old man setting everything ablaze, choking him with torched hands. "What do you think, Chief? Arson or accident?" The fireman on scene found one victim. "Accident. The victim was most likely homeless and squatting here, probably a campfire gone bad. The chief looked about the scene carefully. He bent down to the body of the victim. Wood splinters somehow revived the fire and were embedded in the charred flesh of his neck. Coated with rendered fat from the old man, they were encased perfectly. See the splinters in his neck? He probably got drunk and passed out, lands in the fire, some jagged edges pushed into his neck, fire scatters, and he burns with the building. Pretty open and shut, if you ask me. That sounds good, Chief. I'll have the report typed up by this evening. The chief nodded and walked away, unaware of the cricket watching him. Interesting take. Realism take. I see that you wanted to go sad. Every time I see somebody be like, oh, why is every story happy? I'm like, bro, where are you finding these happy stories? Because it has been a while since I've seen a story end happily. Like, it's a thing. I actually, for some reason, thought that this was gonna turn into an Eldritch God freaking Cthulhu Pinocchio. I don't know why. His strings just becoming his tentacles. I have not even been reading Eldritch fiction, but for some reason, that's where I thought this was gonna go. Still, excellent mood setting, and it's always interesting. Aside from Pinocchio suddenly becoming popular for remakes this year, it's usually not something that I see referenced all that much. It was the only videotape that I actually personally owned as a child. I don't know how I came into owning the Pinocchio videotape, but I had it. The next story is by L.L Newell, titled No Rest. His scent was like old books, sweat, pavement, and coffee. It matched his easy smile and thoughtful gray eyes. She liked this one. Once upon a time, he would have been good for her soul. His lips moved in a hurried frenzy against the base of her neck as his hand tightened under her skirt, around her thigh. Cora didn't really want to kill him. From the next room, someone rang the desk bell. It was the third time in 5 minutes. He pulled away from her and shot an irritated look at the door that could, if he chose it, lead him out to his desk. Her heart leapt. If he could only walk away from now, she could still spare his life. Her master hated witnesses. He didn't leave her. Damn it, the system's automated. Just scan the book, he muttered. His skin was flushed from the way she'd made his heart race. He looked so incredibly alive. It's all right. It's all right if you have to go, Cora whispered. He waited and listened. After a moment, it was clear that whoever had been waiting had given up, and the soft chime of the door told him they were alone in the library once more. He smiled at her and pulled her into a deep kiss. It was all the beauty her heart could stand. With no hope of intervention, she drew up the ceremonial dagger from the pocket of her skirt, and caressing him with one hand, she attacked him with the other, landing the dagger in the side of his neck. His eyes shot open in confused betrayal. She didn't allow him even a millisecond to register it before she began to slice and stab him until he fell to the floor, submitting helplessly to his fate. He'd turned in just a moment from a strong man to a scared, dying boy. She watched the blood and life rush out of him. Without meaning to, she sank to her knees next to him and quietly brushed the hair from his eyes, offering him an almost humane comfort in his agony. She didn't need to look up to know death had come to stand behind her. It wasn't his time. Death's voice was as quiet as a hiss and as overwhelming as a storm. That's not my problem, Cora snapped. Her victim's soul floated before her eyes for just a moment. A spectacular golden globe of light landed softly in Death's beautiful hands. Death held it lovingly and slid it into his satchel. Cora stared at it, curiosity and longing searing her heart. Take me with you, she pled. Death shook his head. You know that's impossible. No soul, no rest. There was almost pity in Death's voice. For an instant it felt like she had a chance. But when she tried to look at Death's face, Death was gone. She collapsed on the chest of her victim. 400 years. It had been 400 years since she'd made her deal with the devil. Magic for mayhem. The devil was made of lies, but in this matter, he kept his word. She had everything the world could offer, and all that she had to do was keep spreading misery and suffering. Her victim today was a perfect sacrifice. Her master had shown her how, in the near future, his little brother would turn to drugs to ease the pain of the loss, and then go to spread addiction to others. And the things that they would do would be like a ripple, leading to more murder, more suffering, more depression. There would be that much less faith in the world, and that much more pain. His mother would lose both her children and die alone in sorrow. Cora's master would be deeply pleased. Her reward would be elaborate, perhaps a new lover, or another trip to Paris. "Take me with you," she pled again after death. But only the devil's cruel laughter answered her. Well, isn't that uplifting? Somehow made a deal with the devil and thought that it would turn out great. Yeah, it never turns out how you... Never make a deal with the devil. It never goes how you think it's gonna go. Ever. In fact, the devil is like, I know exactly what you would hate, and I'm gonna trick you into signing a contract. Get exactly the thing that you really don't want to deal with. Ever. The next story is by Egao Chan, called Bill's in Charge. It was in an old wooden urn of a smiling cat with both paws hanging over its head to form the shape of a heart. Made of one of the legacies, or in other words, direct descendants of the Empress. Meant a toy for the terminally ill children, it could turn any kind of illness into wonderful wishes. But according to rumors and legend, it was not limited to children's illnesses. There had been others who had their wishes granted, just by throwing in something valuable as sacrifice. William Cockburn intended to save it for a rainy day, yet after almost half a decade stuck in his current position, his patience grew thin. So before a business trip to a place in the middle of nowhere in Russia, he put in an heirloom ring from his mother into the cat's belly and made a wish that he would be in charge of the control room.
"Bill Cosby, what happened?"
The voice of Harvey in the earbud broke his reminiscing.
"We're dealing with an issue here. Focus."
"My apologies. I'm going in." William turned to the other armed agents in tactical gear. "Ready? Remember, last check, no gunpowder weapons. He could detonate it even from afar." "Are we really going into a potential legacy, sir?" one of the agents asked. "He's not a legacy. There's no evidence of that," Bill Cosby, or William Cockburn, said. "Just some freak from Russia." The back door of the armored truck opened. Bill Cosby was the first to jump out, still wearing a pair of flip-flops from Still wearing a pair of flip-flops with socks on, a Hawaiian shirt under his tactical vest, and a straw hat. That is Kino right there, Egao. A strange smell rose. The hairs on his back stood up. He jumped to the side without even thinking. Boom! A ball of fire rose as the armored truck was flipped on its belly, throwing the other agents all over the place. Bill was blasted onto a car behind him, breaking its window. "Fuck!" Bill cursed as the familiar goggles at the distance before his mind succumbed to the darkness with the question, "How the hell did he know?" lingering in his mind. When he came to, Bill had no choice but to take a bicycle from the kid who was licking a 3-scoop ice cream and started riding like hell toward the hotel. If this Russian virgin... Rude, Bill. If this Russian virgin knew about their attack plan, he must have known of the control room as well. The chains almost fell when he ditched the bicycle in front of the hotel. He almost threw his keys at the valet parker before he realized he did not drive here, nor was it the occasion. The smell of smoke and burning tortured his nerves. The smoke made his eyes wet when he got to the floor of the control room. That Russian virgin already came. Who would have thought a YouTuber with almost no followers and liked to play with random explosives would be able to do something like this? The bodies of the agents were everywhere. All seemed to have died from the explosions. Bill pulled out his hand crossbow and tried to sneak through the empty hallway. This was probably the only thing that could work now. A purely mechanical weapon with only solid metal and a bolt-specialized piezoelectric ceramic tip that could shock an elephant upon impact. Oh, they got the big guns for this kid. The control room door seemed to be open from where Bill was standing. There was no sign of forced entry. Either someone forgot to lock the door, or that Russian virgin had somehow figured out how to hack their encrypted locks. "Bill?" A familiar voice came from behind and almost made him jump. "Hey, there's my favorite YouTube star!" Bill turned with a stiff head and a stiffer smile. "How are ya? What are you doing here? It's not safe, kiddo!" Before he could continue, he grabbed onto his neck and slowly lifted him up. Never could he ever think this slim, goofy young man could possess this much physical strength. What are you doing?" The studio would be very unhappy. "I know who you are, Bill." The young man's smiley face and goggles on his forehead had never seemed so menacing and deadly. And I know what you did to her. You shouldn't have, Bill. But we didn't know! We didn't! Bill's feet kicked in the air. You did, the young man smiled. You just didn't care. It's not what you think! Bill felt his breaths getting shorter. She's actually out there! She's... And just when the young man was confused for a moment, he pulled the trigger of the hand crossbow, aiming at the young man's foot. The bolt hit the ground next to the target, which was probably why the electrical shock did not hit Bill as hard as it should have. He rushed toward the open metal door and triggered an instant lockdown with his key fob. There was no guarantee that it would hold for long, but it was the only thing that he could do. Inside the control room, all he could see under the dim lights were bodies. The ones of Harvey and Kevin were not hard to find. Even without their heads, their distinct Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops were impossible to mistake. It seemed he was on his own now, and he was possibly the only survivor in this division. But there was nothing that he could do but send out a distress signal to call for help. Bill Cosby sending out a signal of warning. He felt his throat burning up and swelling. On the screen, the red handprint of his neck grew brighter and even started smoking. He could barely let the words out. Don't go for her, she's... The human body was made of nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen atoms, easy to make a bright, colorful boom if arranged the right way. How could Bill not know? You are so hilarious. Oh my gosh. I love these so much. Look, I am buying Egao's book right now. This Poison City, there are two. Poison City I have grabbed just now. Also, I have no idea when I'll be able to read these, but Egao, I now have both of your books because freaking A, you are hilarious, and I love seeing your work. Also, I think the legacy stuff is especially hilarious. But between the legacy stuff and also the Gimp Man, and everything else that you've done, I love your style of creativity. I'm sold. Your books are on my to-be-read next year, I swear. I mean, I just purchased both of them, so that's just how it is. The next story, freaking A. Okay. The next story is by Allison Miller. Indriana had called Tessa again and again, getting sent a voicemail each time. She'd went back to the house to find it an inactive crime scene. Not giving a fuck, she cut the tape with her keys and went in, flipping the light on and off to find no power. She went out of the box and flipped the breaker. Fuck, she exclaimed over and over, slamming her purse against the electrical post. Once all of her stuff was on the ground, she scattered it further, throwing her phone against the house. It fell next to a spigot. Collecting herself, Adrena grabbed her discarded items, asking her destroyed makeup palette, "Why is she doing this to me?" Once she had her things put in her bag, she walked over to the spigot. Turning it caused it to sputter out hard water, the pipe to rattle within the house, and then finally slow a tap and then cease completely. Adrena kicked the spigot until bent, collapsing into a fit of hysterics, wailing into the ground. In this moment, she wished Tessa was here. She wished that she could give her the beating that lying bitch said she got. She'd never walk around after Adrena was done with her. Crunching of grass brought her back to the present. Slowly, she stood up and turned to see who was behind her. There stood Tessa, no broken bones to speak of, eating seeds. Adrena readied her bag, aiming for her head. She brought it down hard, but Tessa didn't even flinch. More seeds fell to the ground. Adrena wound her fist up and punched Tessa square in the back. It hurt her hand to hit the bony spine, but all Tessa did was drop her bag of seeds. Adrena reached between Tessa's legs to get to the bag, a claw-like hand closing around her wrist. The fingers were so long it wrapped around her wrist twice. It smiled at her, revealing rows of boxy, dull teeth like broken piano keys. Its eyes were silver and lips cut away jaggedly, seeds flowing out of its mouth as it snarled. Adrena loosened her grip on the bag, backed up, and apologized. Okay, Tessa. You can have your seeds, I'm sorry. The thing wasn't bent forward or backward, but twisted sideways and looking out at Adrena between its legs. The thing unwound and stood up, walking toward Adrena like a flailing tube man outside a car dealership. Adrena turned and started running for her car, realizing she'd forgotten her keys out by the post. The thing was staring at the ground, oblivious to Adrena. Taking her chance, she ran wildly, searching the perimeter for her keys. She found them on the edge of the property, where the grass meets the woods. Her fingers closed around them. She pushed herself to her feet as a tight, gripping pain pressed her head and into her brain. An awkward scream that sounded like a mix of crying and laughing erupted from her. The Tessa creature walked over, now less than a foot away, shoving the teeth into its mouth and slapping its lips together. A smile pulled at the ends of its mouth like it was watching a movie and gobbling pop instead of shoving seeds into a mouth that wasn't human. The long claw finger reached out. "No, don't touch her," a voice said. The thing backed up, seeming to act like a child who'd been berated by a parent. Turning, Adrena saw him, the man whose face hung on Tessa's wall. Claudius Brand had his hand in her head. She thrashed and clawed at his hands, but only ended up pulling out her hair. A middle finger came down into Adrena's brain, and the screaming stopped. Her body started writhing on its own, still thrashing, but without aim now. She made a futile attempt to get to her feet, and only ended up kicking her feet out and scrambling wildly out of the grass. Chancing a look, she saw him gritting his teeth and pressing harder. The earth seemed to rattle, Adrena's keys next to her now lax hand jingling on their own. The clothespin on the line joined the chorus of evil. Lights in the forest around her peeked through the trees, lighting up the valley in the painful luminescence. Blood issued from Adrena's nose and mouth. She'd clamped down on her tongue, the countdown beginning. 19, 18, 17. Adrena's eyes filled with white. The last image of demon Tessa bent sideways. 16, 15, 14. Electrical impulses filled Adrena's body. 13, 12, 11. Her bowels and bladder released. 10, 9, 8. The breath got harder to intake and slower. 7, 6, 5. The electrical impulses ceased. 4, 3, 2. Slowly, with agony and knowing her last seconds were upon her, he cursed her with hearing her last heartbeats. 1. Adrena fell to the ground. The tension in this scene is so high. The author did a really great job in this of creating a lot of tension in a little bit of time and building a lot of action. I have to say, there is more tension in this scene than there has been in 60% of Will Jordan's book. Not that I like to really compare authors doing their different things, but that is his 19th book. Allison Miller, you're ballin' with the tension. The next story is by Keith Thorpe. Esther Cohen had never been known for the rigid adherence to the dictates of normal behavior. Not that she was devoid of an awareness of socially acceptable conduct, nor was she incapable of squeezing herself into the box of self-restraint that everyone else in the world appeared able to slip themselves into with such seeming ease. Her sister Rachel, for example. It was simply that, whenever the right or wrong, depending on the perspective, conditions obtained in a given situation, Esther became oddly cognizant of the many and varied outward manifestations of her growing frustration at having to contain herself and behave appropriately. Her sister's bat mitzvah 9 years ago was a fairly good example of this. Rachel had been reading the Aliyah and was approaching the last mafter when Esther took it into her head to pull out her phone and use the sound effect app to simulate the sound of digestive distress and flatulence. In the crowded synagogue, it had been difficult for anyone to isolate the source of the sound erupting from her phone. Their muted realism had lent them an authenticity which made most people in attendance believe that the gassy victim was trying hard to muffle their rectal expulsions in the pew he or she was seated in. Rachel, however, had known exactly who had been responsible for the interruption of this, her big day. Upon returning home, she had exacted her vengeance on her younger sister by posting on her Twitter profile the name of Esther's crush, David Levine. Included in this tweet had been a video of Esther sighing with sappy rapture over David's yearbook picture. Esther had been mortified, which of course had been Rachel's intention. Now, 9 years later, Esther found herself seated again in a synagogue of her youth, with her sister Rachel once more being the center of attention, thinking about her rather strained, distant relationship with her sister. The two of them had never been particularly close, they were just too different for that. Yet neither had they been overtly hostile to one another. Amiable strangers would best describe them. She sat, recalling a vaguely defined wish that she had made once, appealing to the cosmos that someday this mutually agreed upon indifference between them would evolve into something else, something real. Well, thought Esther, as the rabbi began to recite the Kaddish. She listened with half an ear, her attention focused on the plain cedar coffin resting on the bier in front of the altar, the coffin which enclosed her sister Rachel within its fragmented darkness. Esther remembered the wish that she had made, absently wishing that she might someday feel something for her sister she barely knew, something other than benign disinterest. It seemed, Esther thought, that her wish had been granted. I feel like I just got blue balled. Like, I'm invested. I want to see where this is going. Also, I thought that this was going to be a wedding and she was going to interrupt her sister's wedding in the same way that she interrupted her sister's bat mitzvah. But no, it is the funeral. And I want to say, is it going to turn into an Eldritch God situation? I don't know why I'm like Eldritch God this today. I'm waiting for the Eldritch wish that accidentally happens. But great. The vocabulary in this and the specific narrative voice that I'm assuming is Keith Thorpe's voice, very nice. The stylization and the way that it talks and kind of the sarcasm and elevated style of the narration, very nice. That's where all the humor is for me. The next story is by Aphrah Ashe. He was the first to arrive atop the mountain after 3 months of travel. The summer heat was hateful and his once white cloak was stained in red and brown. He'd killed so many to get here. He pulled himself up onto the final plateau and took in the sights. A verdant grove, so peaceful, and despite the height, the air was thick and warm. Trees lined the area, white bark with sharp angular branches and leaves. At the center of the plateau was another higher area, so he walked across the flower field to get there. He stepped through a series of black and white and red roses, their thorns catching on his cloak and snagging his boots. He reached out to climb the central rise and the rock face shifted, creating easy handholds for him. He hesitated a moment, then climbed. He'd come this far, he wouldn't be deterred. This would be his only chance. This only happened once in 1,000 years. At the top, he found a strange creature, a small, furry dog with large bat wings tucked at its sides. Its tail was long, too long. It swayed in the air in curls and loops like a vine. Its eyes were hollow, and looking into them, he thought he saw the universe. This creature was a god. "You are not worthy. State your wish." Its voice echoed through his skull, and its lips never moved. It was a deep yet high-pitched at the same time, masculine yet feminine, calming yet terrifying. "I wish to become the world's greatest hunter. I ask for strength and agility. I ask to be able to take down any target." "Your wish is granted." The voice was louder than before and hurt him in a way that he couldn't describe. Was it speaking directly to his soul, tearing it apart with its presence? He felt himself change. His various cuts and bruises healed. His arms and legs grew stronger. His fatigue, the exhaustion, and the trial to get here was gone. He'd never felt more awake, more alive. His clothes changed too. His cloak became a natural red, and so did everything else. His tunic became a shirt and buttoned down, and the front of his heavy travel trousers with many pockets became sleek suit trousers, more suit to business or a ball. He gained a waistcoat and a long-tailed jacket. "You will be my hunter," the voice said, softer this time. "Every 1,000 years when I rise, you will be by my side. Every 1,000 years when I rise, you will be by my side. You will travel my domain and kill those who seek my power, letting only the worthy reach me. That is the cost of your wish, the eternal hunt." The tail of the creature swung forward and split, grabbing him by the arms and legs and neck. He was pulled to his knees, the fur of the tail electrified and painful to the touch. He couldn't move, couldn't weep. He'd sought out the wish so that he could feel the thrill of the hunt for the rest of his life, and it seemed that he'd get that. He recalled the creature that he'd hunted over the years, the people he'd saved from monsters, the destruction he'd prevented. It was over now. He wondered if he would remember the 1,000 years' sleep. Would it even be sleep? Would he be forced to stay awake the entire time? Or would he just jump to the next hunt for the wish? Would he get to live a normal life between now and then? He doubted that last one. "Come, my faithful servant. It is time to serve your new purpose." Darkness took what used to be him, and when he awoke, he would be the Crimson Hunter. You know, I saw what you said on Twitter, and I can see this as being the prologue for something for sure. What's going to turn into a bigger story. Probably, I feel like it would focus, or a part of it would be like this character's humanity, especially now that he's on this other side of things, and traded his independence and humanity to be the greatest hunter, and possibly have to do with like the next guy that came along. I don't know. There are so many different directions in which this could go, and it's got a strong start. Also, I also like how quickly this established like what this character was doing, what they wanted, and where they were going, and also gave this sense of mythology and bigger than this moment. Excellent job. The next story is by KawaiiGroovycat, and thank you for submitting again. I enjoyed reading your story last time, and I'm so excited to see you submit it again. Despite myself, I was still surprised when nobody in the house reacted to the robin that had found itself inside by accident. If the TV hadn't been playing in the background, I would have been sure that I was alone. Honestly, I may as well have been, with my mom having gone wherever she went with whoever her boyfriend of the week was, and my sister Victoria having a TV turned up all the way. Thus, it became my responsibility to rescue the poor bird from the dreary indoors. The patio door near the dining room table was the key to getting the bird outside. I blocked off every other exit and then opened the door as widely as I could. From there, the robin would see the light of the open air and fly toward it. At least, that's what it was supposed to do. Instead, the robin walked slowly, looking almost as though it owned this place. Eventually, finally, it stepped outside. Surely, this would have been the moment where it spread its wings and got away from this place. But instead, it seemed to be glowing ever so faintly. Maybe it was just the light of the Somerset making it look like that, but I could definitely see goldish light emanating from it. Gold. The image that appeared in my mind made my insides yearn to become my outsides. I've always hated that color, and this bird wasn't doing such a good job of making itself an exception. I thought that maybe if I scowled at it with enough anger, it would finally go away, but instead it turned to me and stared me right in the eye. We stared at each other for what had to have been 5 minutes before I heard a voice that could have only come from the robin.
You and me just this one style. If you could wish for one thing, what would it be?
What the hell? Was all I could manage, my fists clenched around the door handle.
Please and me.
The robin hopped closer to me.
Look like I get the chance to talk to humans every day. I sing and sure humans hear me, but sometimes it's like singing until a void, you know.
I gritted my teeth. You're just a bird in my imagination. There's no point in talking back to you. You shouldn't even know my name.
I crap on you to prove that I'm real, but I'm such a nice little birdie. And I hate to ruin it pretty head of yours. You can't tell me you don't got a void and you're aching to be filled. Everyone's got one, human or not.
That I couldn't deny. I'd seen Mom's before it became mine. Her void was some man with a gold tooth that she called Mae and Victoria's dad. She had shown me the picture when I couldn't have been older than 6, but aside from the gold tooth of his, all I could remember seeing was the sad smile whenever my mom looked at him. But Mom, I asked her, why don't you just go and get a new husband? Because, dearie, she had replied, your dad is the only man I'll ever love. He'll come back someday. I'm sure of it. At the time, I'd accepted the answer. I had no choice but to accept it. But I knew better these days. He had come back and he wasn't my dad, because if he was, he would have been here for me from the start. I didn't know what dads were supposed to do, but I knew that this man would have done those sorts of things if he really was my dad. He wouldn't have stayed, and Mom wouldn't need any of the bad men that she brought home as cheap knockoffs of the man that she really loved. Maybe he would have let me ride on his shoulders instead of hurting me and touching me like the bad men did. But he didn't do that, and he wasn't here, and he wasn't my dad. I stared at the potted plant near my feet. Why are you doing this? My voice was weaker than I wanted it to be. So what if I don't have my dad? So what if I don't have a dad? So what if my mom's off with someone and can't be home with us instead? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference.
Doesn't it?
The robin tilted its head.
Let me ask you again. You clearly wish for one thing in particular. Not much is obvious. What is it?
I bit my lip so hard it split. I think you know what I wish for.
Yeah.
The robin conceded.
You're not very subtle, Emily. I forgive you.
It spread its wings.
After all, you gave me exactly what I wanted. Well, thanks. I'll see what I can do for you.
Its glow faded and it flew away. I watched it until it became nothing more than a microscopic speck in the sky, and then I shut the door and followed the noise of the TV, and I found Victoria again. I sat with her, but I didn't really pay attention to whatever was streaming on TV. Magical girls weren't really my thing. Hours passed. Mom and that man still weren't home, as expected. As such, it fell to me to make sure that we both got to bed before it became morning. I saw the robin again in my dreams. Admittedly, I had forgotten about my interaction with it until now. The dream only lasted a few moments, but I could see so clearly that it was almost as convincing as when I was awake. But I could see it so clearly that I was almost convinced I was awake. The robin flew past me, carrying a large yellow rose on its beak. Mom had a bunch of those growing near the porch. She tended to those like she was caring for a small child. For that reason, those flowers made me sick, even though they were undeniably beautiful. When I woke up, my dream hadn't faded from my memory like most of my dreams would do, but still, it couldn't have meant anything. Birds didn't talk, and no matter how much you wished for something, nobody would listen to you. That was just the way things were. Today, I would walk to school as always, while my mom drove Victoria to elementary school 5 minutes away from home. She was at least able to do that much, I suppose. My backpack was probably about half the size of my body from all of the books that I carried in it, but I was used to the weight on my shoulders. And when I opened the door, I immediately wished that I hadn't. I saw it the moment I opened the door. On the porch, a human skull sat in the matching rocking chair, holding a yellow rose in its teeth. My heart accelerated. I blinked, stepping closer to it. Surely it had to be another hallucination, right? After all, birds didn't talk, and skulls didn't just appear out of nowhere. I reached a hand out to poke it. It felt cold, but I wasn't sure if that was because of the bone or my hands. Either way, I felt it was real. And when it tipped over sideways, I saw a gold tooth in its mouth and realized that the robin had listened to me, after all. Oh my gosh, I got chills. This is the kind of magical realism, like spooky stuff, that I freaking love so much. Oh my gosh, KawaiiGroovycat. This makes me think of like Ruth's The Casual Magical Realism, where you've got this, we just read it, so I really don't need to describe it because, but this is the kind of stuff that I absolutely love, where it's just this nature of magical things happening. I can't talk. I just like it so much. This is absolutely what I love. Bro, I want to read so much more of your stuff. The vibe is great. The mix-in of the magic, the symbolism. I love this. I don't have much more to say other than that. I hope you submit again, or you like share with me some of the other stuff that you're working on at some point, because I love this stuff. And the next story, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. The next story is by R.S. Alessi, called Changeling. Call it official, Xander was sick of watching sports. He hadn't gotten to this point quickly or easily. Living in a small apartment with an ever-expanding list of restrictions, he was left with little to do but watch television and watch it he had, well beyond his usual fare of football, baseball, and basketball. Now, 8 months into his exile, he knew all of the top professional bass fishermen, steeplechase riders, and biller players by name. Whatever you had planned for me, I wish you'd get it over with. Stretched across the sofa, watching his favorite sportscaster rehash last night's game, Xander voiced a complaint out of boredom. He'd said similar before, and John had always ignored it. John glanced up from the book that he was reading. Put your sneakers on. You'll be wanting dark, comfortable clothes, too. Xander sat upright. Are you serious? Aye. John walked over to the window and peered out the blinds. 'Tis a fine night for it. No moon, and in this heat, I'll have the windows open. They? Who's they? The soft smile. You'll soon see. John drove out into the mountains. He cradled a doll crafted of sticks and bound together with twine. Long thorns poked out of it from every angle. Xander opened his mouth to ask about it, but John cut him off. I'll explain everything you need to do when we get there. There was a modest one-story cabin a few dozen yards off a gravel country road. John drove past it and pulled off further down the road. They snuck down behind the house. Blind in the dark, they waited for their eyes to adjust. From somewhere nearby, a creek bubbled. I'll hoist you onto the roof. Open the window, then come back to the wee one. John nodded to the thorny doll in his arms. Swap her out with the brain inside and we'll be on our way. What? Which part was unclear? You want me to snatch a child? Aye. What are you planning to do? That's none of your concern. Like hell it's not. You ask me to kidnap a baby, I deserve to know what's going to happen to it. No harm will come to the lass. It was a poor answer, but disobedience violated the terms of his pact with John. Xander. Their eyes met. Will you do this? Yes, sir. John boosted him up. After a few seconds of awkward scrambling, he was on the roof. A few feet further, and he reached the dormer window. As John predicted, the window was open to the night air. Carefully, he pried the screen from its frame and propped it against the dormer. He hesitated. He hesitated on the threshold. Service or death? Those had been John's terms. He could still choose death. Xander, you forgot something. Oh, right. He crept back over the roof's edge and accepted the strange doll from John. Be gentle with her. John's thorny baby prickled his arms and chest. He cradled it gingerly and tiptoed to the window. Taking a deep breath, he climbed in. The room was more walk-in closet than nursery. Someone had painted it a cheery turquoise with fluffy white clouds shaped like zebras, giraffes, and elephants. The mural was the nicest thing about the room. Its furniture, a mismatched crib, bookshelf, and chest of drawers, was chipped and cracked and held together in places with duct tape. Babies weren't his thing, but Xander had a few nieces and nephews, and he sorta knew what to do with them. He slunk to the edge of the crib and peered down. Yep, that was a baby. He had no idea how old it was. Shh, he murmured, recalling John's directions. He laid the thorn baby at one end of the crib and slid his arm under the human child. With a quick sweep, he tucked it against his chest. The baby stirred fitfully, then settled back to sleep. That's it, cutie pie. Out the window, down the roof, he deposited the baby into John's outstretched arms. Did you set the screen back into place? John asked. No. Go up there and take care of it. Xander crept to the side where he'd propped the screen. He was about to step in front of the window when he heard a voice, feminine in range, humming softly. She approached the window. He inched higher up the roof. The humming stopped. Jebediah? The screen was gone. The screen is gone! I think someone broke in the house. Xander's heart tried to knock a hole through his chest. Any second now, this woman was going to notice that her daughter was missing and really start screaming. Are you sure that the screen was there when you opened the window? The second voice, a man, sounded groggy. Another sound of hysterics came from the woman before the man finally hushed her. Of course, honey. I'll look around. A few minutes later, the window slammed shut, and Xander stood there, frozen in uncertainty. Surely these people had called the cops. Come down, John whispered from below. An eternity had passed. The house was silent. It's time to leave. Together, he and John stole back to the car. He had held the sleeping baby in his lap while driving home. When they pulled into the parking lot, he asked, Why didn't those people notice their child was missing? Because I could not take what I didn't give. Then why'd you give her away? John scowled at the steering wheel. Go on, off to bed with you. John left Xander standing in front of the apartment building and didn't return until the following morning, alone, without the baby. There was nothing for Xander to do but watch another game. Following up with Crazy... with GroovyCat. I love these two so much that I just find that, I don't know. Obviously, there's so much going on with John, and just experiencing it all through Xander to see kind of the bizarreness of everything. I just love it. They're so interesting. I don't have much more to say than I just kind of go along for the ride every freaking time with both of these two, because and I really like your style. Like, having watched you grow over the last 2 years with your writing, Ruth, has been amazing. Especially when you're short. Like, I remember reading the first draft, like, whatever, the draft. I remember reading the earlier draft of your bigger project that you're working on, and then comparing that to the short stories that you submit, and how your details and your scene setting and your tension has really improved and come out, like, met up with where your dialogue is at and the naturalness of your characters. It's been incredible to see, and I'm so glad I've gotten to see you grow. The last story is by NXrd. I'm never sure how to pronounce it when I see it, so I still just think nightmare. It's titled Requiem Against the Villain. A letter, a gun, and a dead body was all he left. A mirror shattered, the tiled floor covered in blood, and the bodies slopped over the toilet with an arm in the sink. She stood in the doorway, hands shaking, holding a gun in her left and a note in her right. Nothing could describe the feeling of the internal terror she felt. She had gone from bliss to horror in the span of a minute. Still naked, still unsure, but this wasn't how it was supposed to be. He was supposed to be her future. She wouldn't have given it up otherwise. She had been saving herself for her other half. She thought that he was the one and took a hasty chance. Maybe it was their connection. Maybe it was how suave he was when he spoke, how elated he made her feel, how safe she felt around him. He was like no other man that she'd ever known. He was indeed too good to be true, and things just happened in a whirlwind of passion and desire. Even his manhood was perfect. It was just as how she dreamed her first time would feel. The thickness, the depth, the gasping pleasure it gave her every few thrusts. It was just like how it was in those smutty books that she'd sift through for critique on her YouTube page. But as adept at reading as she was, she still hadn't got past, "I'm sorry, Aaron," on that note. Determined to keep reading, she took a deep breath, held the paper steady, and backed away from the doorway to sit on the bed. Some choices. Being on the cemented bed made the words harder to see, but she didn't mind the darkness's embrace. Light only revealed vile and disgusting things. She wasn't ready to expose herself. The letter continued. Aaron, I've enjoyed every letter and every DM we shared. You have been the beauty that I have been missing in my life. Every day was a treat to wake up and see my inbox with a message from you. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that you and I would have this moment. Why did we? Why at this moment in our lives? I've wanted you to always look at me with a sense of pride. I've always wanted to enjoy the things I said. I've always wanted you to enjoy the things I've said and be an uplifting voice in a sea of doubt. She looked up again from the letter toward the open doorway filled with golden light and a dead man. Uplifting, she said shakily. Your smile was a thing that I always looked forward to seeing in your videos, and on that Discord call we had a while back, I never thought that it would get so personal, but I enjoyed it. Your voice, your laugh, your beautiful green eyes, and your red hair, the red and blue pearl earrings you wear. I love the duality of it all, but I never got to ask you why you wear the black ring on your finger, even though you aren't married. She took a moment to look at her hand. A wave of heat ran through her body and her stomach lurched. The tan lines she managed to see felt like a brand of shame. There was no point to putting the ring back on. She'd be a liar to herself if she did. This evening had too many sour notes, and she wasn't going to make any more. Another breath. She steadied the paper, kept reading. It didn't matter, though. I never expected to actually meet you, despite wishing for months that I could. I really thought my wish could come true, but seeing you at the indie convention was just too much. Why did it have to be now that we met? It had to be a test from God himself, or the devil, I'm not sure at this point. The word point had spots of water on it, like he had been crying. Everything just seemed to line up like magic. We have hotel rooms that faced each other and the writers' workshops that we were in one after another, like all of our flight times. That meant that we could have been in the same plane if we were coming from the same state. How did we miss each other until tonight? Why did our conventions double back to our lewd meme jokes? Over Discord, it wasn't a big deal, but in person, all I could feel was heat. I know that you felt it too. But I'm sorry I lied. I lied about everything most important to you. Her breath was becoming more slow and measured, but every breath held just a second longer reading. I'm not single. I'm newly married. Those words struck like lightning to her core. She gripped the gun tighter than she had ever held anything before. She gripped the gun tighter than anything she'd ever held before. If I'd known that we would meet, I would never have gotten married. But I had to have you. I had to know what it was like to be with you. She stood up from the bed. Her body broke out in sweat, heat rising and falling, blood boiling. She glared through the page for a moment. 2 moments. 3 moments. 4 moments. She was in the doorway again. My selfishness, I've seduced the woman I idolized into becoming the other woman to my wife. I have made a woman who hates cheaters into a woman that helped me cheat. How screwed up am I? Her eyes were like daggers. She bit her lip to gain some sense of thought. How dare you? She said. How fucking dare you? Her voice grew, her face turned red enough to match her hair. Her body followed, but with a fainter color. She couldn't contain the eruption of emotion raging through her. How dare you! You fucking cunt! How dare you! She leveled the gun and fired. Bang, 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 bang! The body flopped onto the floor, hollow and still dead, while the eyes of the shattered glass glared judgment on her. She knew the police were bound to make an appearance now after the loud disturbance. They would see her here, still naked, completely exposed, but now forever within the darkness. She looked at the letter again, reading the last lines. I can't live with myself knowing that I've done this to you. I can't live with myself knowing your history, knowing that you hate cheaters, knowing that you hate me. I brought my gun. It's in the nightstand next to my wallet with a picture of my wife if you care to know. You can have your pound of flesh with it. If I'm still alive, I'm so sorry. But whatever happens, please go on living and sit in the comfort that someone like me is no longer around. She tossed the paper at the body, her gaze distant and cold. Go on living. Comfort, she murmured. She looked down at the pathetic scum that was her future. She hated this moment even more. Shooting him brought no satisfaction. He was already dead. He took her virginity, swindled her integrity, and muted her revenge, leaving only a shit letter, a useless gun, and a worthless body. Fuck you! Bang. Is this a murder-suicide? Did he kill himself? No, yeah, because we didn't see her pull the gun from the thing, so he could have killed himself, and then she had the situation. Or she killed him. There's a lot of ambiguity in this, because there's also, did she just shoot him again, or did she shoot herself? Because now she was going to have to deal with this, and we're having a Kiryu moment here where the cops are going to come in, and she's got the gun, and there's the body. Whether she did it or not, she looks guilty. Or, alternatively speaking, there's also so insanely manipulative. It's, well, what is the goal? What is the purpose that this character wanted in what he did? Because it looks like he's like, I knew that you would hate this. I hid all of this from you, but I had to see what it would be like to sleep with you. But I also, here's a picture of my wife and also a loaded gun. And did she kill herself? Was this set up so that she would kill herself? Because it's either going to be, because she talked about like, oh, she knows that because of the noise, the cops are going to come. And so then she can either look guilty maybe of killing this guy or kill herself. But either way, if she lives, she's probably going to go to jail, but also have to deal with the guilt that she is now responsible. Like if she feels responsible for his suicide because he's like, oh, you're disappointed in me and I can't live with myself for doing this. A story of the insanity of an attraction. That's what I feel like this is. But you do know, even somebody that doesn't like cheaters can still be like, you know, I hope you go and live your life over there. This is dubious. But what an interesting look into seeing what your first piece submitted to LMIAY is. I wonder if you'll submit again, because it looks like you like the twisties. Nightmare. Because there's some manipulation going on in this story. And I'm still like, did he brought a gun and a picture of his wife? Did he go with the intentions of killing himself after he did this because he knew how it was going to make him feel, but he still needed to know? Well, also, the building emotional intensity, great job with the pacing, with the wording, with the building of the room. I think this is your first time submitting, so I appreciate you submitting. I enjoyed reading your writing style. I feel like you're a very high emotion style writer. I laugh at this while I'm like, well, I'm thinking of stuff that's not necessarily as intense as Joey's Joey-ness. Anyway, those were the submissions for this month. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Which was your favorite? And if you're interested in reading more from any of the people that were featured today, any links that they submitted will be listed down below with their names, so check out their stuff. Maybe get some books, because I know there are some books linked down there, so I will go ahead and say I think this is the best episode of LMIAY so far, and you guys just keep leveling up, more people keep joining, and the skill level and the entertainment just keeps getting better and better. Thank you so much for being a part of this series, you guys. You are awesome. I love reading your stuff. So, you know, thank you for sending me stuff to play. I don't know what my hands are doing, but thank you for sending me stuff to play around with. And that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and don't die. Hello, boomers! My name is Yanananana. How are you feeling today? In case you didn't know, I'm a YouTuber from Nide, a small town in eastern Ukraine. My family has never really understood what I do in the woods, but all I've ever wanted is to make a better life for us all. Papa always comes home from the mines dirty, angry, and tired. It's a necessary evil to do your job and be in a place that you don't want to be. But I've never wanted to spend my life doing exactly what was necessary of me. Everything changed for me when a couple of Americans appeared at my door. They said they wanted to sponsor my channel and handed me military-grade explosives. Can you believe it? Military-grade. The lights will be incredible going forward. With this help, my videos will be next level. I just hope they are as they say, and this isn't some kind of trick. I mean, what would there be to gain? Boris says people are simple. Everything comes down to money and power. And Alex tells me ignorance will not save me from trouble. I understand where they are coming from, but I do not like to think that way. There is more to life than a cruel of superficial goods, hatred, and destruction. Anyway, I do not like where this video is going, so I will see you on the explosives field. Boom, boom, boom. Salute.